call. Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I am pleased to follow on from the Chair of the Health Select Committee, Dr Paul Hutchison. I came onto the Health Select Committee partway through this inquiry, and I could feel that the committee was determined to make progress on this bill. There were a lot of submissions to hear. And it was important that all those voices were heard, and the Minister in her speech today read out the names of a large number of the organisations who've advocated over a long period with good evidence and research to back up their arguments, and we heard from a large number of those people, and they were eloquent and often quite emotional submissions. We also heard from the other side of the debate, and as the Speaker has just resumed his seat said, there were inventive things put in front of us. There were claims of all manner of economic espionage that was being undertaken, and there were some outrageous statements as well, Mr Speaker, about perhaps the lack of social concern of some retailers. So I'm very pleased to be able to speak in the third reading debate in support of the Smoke-Free Environments Controls and Enforcement Amendment Bill. And this is one of those times, Mr Speaker, in the House where every New Zealander who is watching this or listening to this will understand exactly what we are trying to stop today. Entering into a corner dairy to see the wall that sits behind the person who's operating that dairy, the colourful wall, the wall designed after years and years of work by the tobacco industry, designed for the sole purpose of making cigarettes attractive, designed in part to make cigarettes attractive to younger people who are more likely to respond. There are people sitting in offices in the United States of America and other parts of the world working out how to make sure that these walls of colour behind the counter of local dairies all over New Zealand and all over the world are attractive to young people. What we are doing in this House today is saying we're not buying into that. As a country, New Zealand is standing up and saying we are not going to let our children and future generations be manipulated by those tobacco companies. And we should all, Mr Speaker, be proud in this House today that we are prepared to take that stand. Sometimes in this House we debate the arcane. We debate things that people in the public arena may not fully understand. Today they will understand, and they will see the difference within 2 years in New Zealand in retail outlets. And that is a very, very good thing. I too want to join in congratulating all those who've worked on this issue, and it is truly a cross-party approach. Minister Turia most definitely deserves the credit for the work that she has done in bringing the current government along to this position. I also want to acknowledge the role of the officials, because I think they did have a difficult task at times to interpret different aspects of the legislation. At the risk of naming names, which is always trouble because there are many, Matthew Everett provided some excellent advice. And also I think the role of the Parliamentary Council Office needs to be acknowledged too. Ross Carter providing the words and the tweaks to the words that managed to keep the meaning that we wanted and still remain within the rules of this House. Mr Speaker, at the risk of you being concerned about the breadth of the debate, I do want to note 2 or 3 things that were raised in submissions to this bill but are perhaps not within the direct scope of it, and they have been mentioned before. One of those is plain packaging. And again, have no doubt that the fact that the tobacco industry is so energised to take on the Australian government is because they know the impact on their sales of plain packaging. They know the impact on their sales of getting rid of the wall of colour behind the counter at the dairy. That's why they're fighting it so hard, and Mr Speaker, that's why it's so important that we go down that path as well, that we continue to stand up. And I know that both Minister Turia and indeed Minister Ryle have made comments that plain packaging is inevitable. I think we need to start making those moves as soon as possible, and many of the people who submitted to our committee also did. The same goes with vending machines, and my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway is a modest chap, and he didn't mention in his own speech that he had a private member's bill to do this very thing as well, and I think it's worth acknowledging that Ian was showing leadership to bring that before the House as well, and we're delighted that the legislation is coming into law as a government bill, but I do think the fact that Ian Lees-Galloway did that is worth noting. Mr Speaker, I also think that there is the beginning in this legislation of an issue that we will have to look at further, and that is the question of sales over the internet. Nowadays, most New Zealanders will be buying products of all types over the internet. That is the way things are going. It will only occur more often. The internet, as we know and as we have debated at some length in this House in recent times, is an arena that is difficult to regulate. That is obviously true, and so further attention will need to be given in the future to the role of the internet in the supply of tobacco into New Zealand. For instance, should we reach the laudable goal in 2025 of a smoke-free New Zealand, sadly the rest of the world will not be smoke-free by that time, I predict. And so we will need to think about the relationship of ourselves to other countries, and indeed the way in which the internet, being a global phenomenon, will facilitate tobacco being used in New Zealand. So these are challenges, Mr Speaker, for another day. I want to highlight 2 or 3 other matters from the bill that I think are important for those who are realising today that we are making this small but very significant step. One of those is around the issue of covert sponsorship and the notion of exclusive supply rights. And this is something that the committee grappled with, but we decided was important to address. And that is the question of the fact that tobacco companies can now not sponsor major events because of earlier legislation, but by creating deals around exclusive supply for events, that can actually have the effect of sponsorship, the effect of promotion of tobacco. And it was good to be able to pass clauses within this bill that we are passing today that will address those issues of covert sponsorship. The same applies to trade rebates and discounts. Again, tobacco companies build relationships with retailers that are designed to facilitate the sale of their products. Those things can amount to a promotional activity, and they need to be addressed, and this bill has done that. Without wanting to break into the consensus around the House, Mr Speaker, the question of signage was one that we obviously debated, and the possibility of having signs that are health warning signs but somehow are also manipulated into being promotion and promotional signs was something again that the committee discussed at some length. The fact that in a sign that bans, that announces the restrictions on tobacco, it could be possible to have a packet of cigarettes appear as part of that with perhaps the number 18 on it or a cross over it, was something that concerned us. Ian Lees-Galloway did put up an amendment in this regard in the committee stages of this debate, Mr Speaker. It wasn't accepted, and it wasn't accepted on the grounds that it was unnecessary. I hope that's true. I hope that it's true that we won't see signs that are actually designed to alert people to the restrictions around the sale of tobacco being used in effect as promotion. And there are examples internationally of where this has happened, and it's something, Mr Speaker, that we would not want to see happen in New Zealand. So I hope that we are not back here in a year or so's time having to correct that, and that there is sufficient coverage in the bill that's in front of us. So, Mr Speaker, I believe that this is a very, very good piece of legislation. It is a small but significant step forward in the journey to ensure that we get rid of the scourge of smoking from New Zealand, that we take on a tobacco industry determined to knock out small countries or countries that try and address the issues that they are promoting. This is a very important piece of legislation. It will be good for the health and well-being of future generations of New Zealand, and I'm proud to support it.
Cool. Kevin